Are you ready for the #1 show on Connecticut politics? Welcome back to CT Politics with Dan Newmyer, your Connecticut politics from the inside out. Now, from Studio D,
CT Politics TV.
Here's Dan Newmyer.
Giving the people what they need.
Welcome to CT Politics TV, Connecticut politics from the inside out. I'm your host, Dan Newmyer. Today, we're joined by Andrew Rice, a Democratic candidate challenging long-term U.S. Rep. Rosa DeLauro in Connecticut's 3rd Congressional District. A molecular biologist and political newcomer from Milford, Rice is running as a progressive populist focused on affordability and working class issues. So let's bring him on right now. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Hey, Dan, I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you. What an interesting race that you've decided to, or challenge, I guess, going from regular real science to political science. Let's talk a little bit about your background. You're a molecular biologist by training, and what made you decide to run for Congress instead of, continuing in science?
So first of all, I just want to thank you for having me on.
Sure.
As a political newcomer. It's very humbling to be on a show like this.
Well,
so I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and for the people of Connecticut. I hope you're all doing well as well. So my background is in molecular and cellular biology. I went to the University of Connecticut for my undergrad, and then I got my master's at the University of New Haven. And for the past 15 years, I have worked in the biology field. 12 years I was at Yale, 5 as a technician, 7 as a lab manager. And then for the past 3 years before resigning my job to run for Congress, I was an associate scientific project manager for a small biotech nonprofit. And so I'm a big Trekkie. And so I got into science because I wanted to be Spock and Beverly Crusher and Julian Bashir and, all of the blue shirts that were investigating and researching ways to improve the human condition and to always move mankind forward. And over the past couple years, I've been starting to have almost like a bit of an identity crisis with my science, because I've come to realize that in the current system that we live in, science is only truly valued as long as it is advancing capitalist interests. And so, for example, when we are trained in science, in the medical field especially, we are focused more on developing treatments, because treatment is a long-term subscription to your health. It is more profitable. It is not as profitable to prevent or cure disease. And then in addition, since we do not have universal healthcare coverage, even if my work does contribute to creating a treatment, it's no guarantee that everyone in this country will have access to said treatment. And to me, that betrays the sanctity of science. So almost a year ago to this day, I was sitting at my computer and, I was pushing my emails, trying to, push scientific projects along. Because as a project manager, you're not as involved in wet lab work. You are more on the logistical side of moving the wet lab work forward. And in the midst of, 70,000 Americans dying a year because they don't have Medicare for all, in the midst of ICE shooting people in the streets, in the midst of our government funding a genocide over in the Middle East, in the midst of all of these wars where people are dying and prices are rising, I just felt that, so on July 25th, actually, I had a confrontation with Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, where I did accost her over her continued support of sending, I think at the time it was an additional $500 million to the Israeli government to use against the Palestinians, when that $500 million could be used towards, universal healthcare coverage, being used towards educational benefits, being used towards housing credits, or, any of this money that could be used for our own people. Why is it being used to commit a genocide across the ocean? And so after that confrontation, I was actually approached by a member of the Hamden DTC who asked me if I would be interested in mounting a challenge. And after just seeing what I thought was, at one point she was doing amazing work, but for the moment, I don't feel that she is meeting the needs of the people. And so I kind of took it as maybe this is a sign that this is what I could be doing to to reclaim that idea of I want to be pushing mankind forward that I just saw as a failure in my previous career, given the structure of the system.
Well, that's a mouthful, Andrew. A couple things. One is, so I'm a building contractor and construction manager by trade, and I had a client who was a PhD and actually ran a small drug company, and she had broken away from the pharmaceutical industry for exactly those same reasons, because she was aware that there were treatments and drugs and research which could really alleviate a lot of people's problems, but they were not being moved forward because the overall group of patients was smaller than other drugs that were, so there was no profitability in pushing and helping those people. And so she started her own drug company to try to fast track some of that stuff forward. So I understand where you're coming from that perspective. So you're running as a progressive populist focused on the working class. How would you define that in practical terms for the voters in the 3rd district? And, you know, Rosa's been in there for a long time. And Democrats have, you know, been pretty happy with her, I think, up to this point. But we do see progressive Democrats, especially in New York, with Mamdani's rise and a number of other people winning elections, that progressives want to take some ground or feel that they could deal with some political issues now with some people behind them. But why don't you explain how your politics are what's needed now?
Great question. So a lot of people, as I've been speaking to them around the district, don't actually realize how progressive Rosa DeLauro is not. There's a government tracker that ranks every one of the House of Representative members from most to least progressive, and I believe she ranks 120th, which means 56% of the current Democratic Party is more progressive than Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. As far as one of the biggest issues around is affordability. And one of the most prominent affordability issues on people's mind is healthcare. People are paying skyrocketing premiums. They're paying skyrocketing co-pays, deductibles. And so I'm a big proponent of Medicare for All. Medicare for All would eliminate those deductibles, would eliminate those premiums, would eliminate those co-pays, and would save taxpayers $450 billion over a 10-year period while guaranteeing that everyone has health care. Rosa DeLauro will only go as far as to push for a public option. And for me, the public option is not good enough. First of all, if we have a public option, it is likely that private insurance industries would try to push off all the high-risk people onto that public option to maintain their profit margins, which would then most likely cripple the public option and create a pretext where private industry could just say, oh, look, this isn't going to work. The best way of ensuring that everyone has healthcare is to expand the risk pool and ensure that as many people are on one single payer system. That way, youthful people who are not as prone to needing hospitalization and medication and services can help subsidize the cost of elderly people. And Medicare for All is actually one of the most well-run and efficient government programs. I believe only 6% of its costs are administrative, which is incredible given how much administrative costs eat up a lot of budgets. In addition, I believe that we are going through a fascist takeover of our nation. And Rosa DeLauro, she doesn't support popular ideas among the Democratic Party even, such as abolishing ICE. She only wants to reform it. And for me, for an agency that already has laws on the book that they are breaking, reformation is not good enough. She also voted in favor of a resolution honoring Charlie Kirk. And if we are going to honor fascists and their rhetoric, then you don't have a leg to stand on to fight back against it. And then lastly is her accepting of corporate donations. In 2024, she had $1.7 million in donations. Over half of them came from corporate PACs. Only 5% came from small dollar donations, and the rest came from large dollar donors. And so I'll take the Abolish ICE example. She takes money from AT&T, from L3Harris, from General Dynamics. All three of those companies have contracts with ICE. Therefore, they all profit off of ICE existence. So when Rosa DeLauro says that she's not for abolishing ICE, is that because that is what she believes is what is best for Connecticut, or is that what her corporate sponsors are telling her to say what is best for Connecticut's people? You know, I've heard her talk about the monopolization of the grocery industry. Well, she has also taken money from Nextera and Oracle. Nextera, they are involved in a conglomeration of media that would, I think, place 80% of media under one person. Why does she not have any focus on that? She mentions, the power grid. She takes money from Avangrid, which owns both Southern Connecticut Gas and United Illuminating. So I have concerns and some trust issues that if she's willing to accept money from these same corporations that she complains about and that she is supposed to regulate in protection of the people, how can she provide any guarantee to people that she is working on their behalf and not on the corporate interest behalf? And then to bring this all together, part of the reason why I believe that Donald Trump rose to power is because the Democratic Party was no longer offering a true opposition to the corporate takeover of American sectors of the economy. And so people fled to Donald Trump because at least Donald Trump was talking about affordability issues. And it just seems that the Democratic establishment only cares about talking about these issues when it's a Republican in office, because the 4 years of Biden, we were struggling with the same affordability costs, and we were all told to just fall in line and vote for the Democrats because everything was fine. It was not. The Democratic Party invalidated people's frustration and anger. Donald Trump validated that frustration and anger, and he won because of that. And so I don't feel that Rosa DeLauro has what it takes and is not in touch with the current moment to provide real solutions that will resonate with people, that will bring them out to the polls in November.
All right. Thanks for pulling that all together for me. But now I want to break it down a little bit. All right. So when you're saying that you'd like to abolish ICE, how do you feel about immigration? And during the Biden administration, there was kind of an unfettered wave after wave, which brought in millions of people who were undocumented into the country. And, many people would say, well, that's contributed to Donald Trump's rise, was the fact that people were saying, hey, how can we support this? We don't know who these people are. It's not organized, where you're just throwing money at it and tax money at it to support all these folks coming in. And I think that a lot of people also felt that that President Biden was getting long in the tooth, and it was kind of obvious to a lot of people that he wasn't functioning as well as probably he should, and that they should run somebody else, or they should have him step aside, or whatever the case may be. And then the hat was passed to Kamala Harris, and a lot of people were like, well, hey, if this is democracy, why aren't we having a primary? So how do you feel about ICE and immigration, and how best to solve the immigration crisis?
First, I would like to mention that I have firsthand experience about the Democratic establishment denying people a primary. That's a different story for a different time.
Okay.
As far as immigration goes, so I think immigration is a much more complex issue than people realize. And first and foremost, one of the reasons why there is always such an influx of immigrants and migrants and refugees is because of America's own failed foreign policy. A lot of times when there are popular governments, especially in the global South, that go to either nationalize resources or make any sort of movements to ensure that their people are being benefited before the corporate interests in our country, you typically see within the next couple of years, the CIA and the American military intervene on some BS excuse. For Iraq, it was oil. For Venezuela, it was oil and cocaine. And they create a pretext to go in. But in fact, it's not about any of these issues. It is typically about securing natural resources that allow these corporations to maintain a profit. So when you destabilize these governments and you take away these people's resources, they will tend to follow where the resources go. So I would argue that part of the influx of immigrants is a mess of our own creation. At the border, I think that is another issue where there isn't enough funding. There aren't enough judges and immigration judges that are capable and able to handle the influx of refugees and asylum seekers. And so ensuring that they have the resources that they need to adequately and quickly process these people, I think is very important. As far as ICE goes, there definitely needs to be some sort of enforcement mechanism. I just believe ICE is too far gone. It is now more a paramilitary organization than it is a police or protection service. And in addition, being undocumented is not a criminal offense. It is only a civil offense. And so my proposal is we abolish ICE, but we reinstate something such as the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Services, with some reforms because they also had their issues. But as far as crime goes, if a undocumented immigrant commits a crime or a citizen commits a crime, we have our local police departments that will respond to that crime. And if in processing that criminal, they discover that they are undocumented, then they can be referred to the INS for processing and deportation in accordance with our laws. But I would also like to point to a Cato Institute study, and Cato is a right-leaning think tank. Now, I don't remember the exact numbers, but they did a study over 1993 to 2024 that showed that immigration and immigrants provided, I want to say like $16 trillion into federal coffers while only taking out $10 trillion. Now, these are not the exact numbers, so please do not quote me on those. It is just an example to show that immigrants actually added more to our revenue streams than they took out. And so my concern is that immigrants and other marginalized communities are typically the first to be targeted when trying to sow division among working class people, so that working class people are more concerned at pointing the fingers towards people that are not actually the problem versus pointing their fingers up at the Epstein billionaire class that is, continuing to exploit workers, exploit the environment, and exploit whatever they can to feed this insatiable greed that they have to just have more and more money that they eventually will not be able to take with them.
Immigration is such a huge issue, and I've followed it since like 1985 when I lived in Southern California. And I think I've been on both sides of the issue at one time or the other. And it just seems that America tends to exploit whoever the latest arrivals are. And it's both sides, right? It's businesses on both sides. It's when really we should have comprehensive reform, which gives us the workers for the industries that we need, and a sensible immigration program. But I guess we're going to have to wait on that for a little bit. You fell short of the 15% threshold at the Democratic Convention and are now petitioning to get on the ballot. How has that process been, and why are you continuing to fight?
So for anyone that's not aware, yes, we were 6 delegates short at the Democratic State Convention. We were just 6 delegates short. But the convention chair broke several rules. Vinnie Morrow, the Democratic Town Committee chairperson for New Haven, who was the chair of the convention, broke several conventional rules. The 2 most consequential were the roll call vote and the 10-minute switch window. So in a roll call vote, each town was supposed to stand up and announce how their delegation was voting. So Ansonia, 6 for Rosa, 2 for Rice, et cetera, et cetera. it was not a roll call vote. It was just a simple tally done behind closed doors. Now, the reason why that is important is one of our biggest areas of support was Hamden, which is, I think, the 6th or 7th town that would have announced their results. As people saw momentum building, because one of the concerns that was brought forth from us that was very unfortunate is that delegates were saying that they were concerned about voting for the campaign because of the fear or threat of retaliation from Democratic town committees and from the Rosa campaign herself, saying that if you support this man at convention, do not expect the Democratic Party to continue supporting your campaign for office or to continue supporting your constituents, or giving you something that a pet project that you've been working on. You can expect that to go away because we do not want you voting for this man. Had the delegates seen in time how we were gaining momentum, we believe we could have picked up several more delegates. But the more consequential rule that was broken was the 10-minute window. So in the first congressional district, Jillian Gilchrist originally got 8% of the delegates. I had 13%. They were given that 10-minute window, and she was able to get the additional 7% to make it onto the ballot. We are convinced that had we had been given that 10-minute window, we would have been able to have gotten 6 more delegates to switch over, because when you have 51 people standing together versus 5, it's much harder to go after a group of 51 people than it is to go after a group of just 5 or 6. And so we feel that they broke that rule on purpose to try and force us off the ballot, which is, I think, another issue, because as a political newcomer, if you are so concerned and so worried about standing up against me and defending your record against me, a political newcomer, what gives anyone in this district confidence that you will have what it takes to go up against the Republican candidate or to go up against Donald Trump in the Congress? And so another reason why, so I want to continue this campaign for several reasons. 1, I still believe in giving people a choice. 2, I still want to carry that message of Medicare for all, retroactively reducing student loan interest to 1% to alleviate the debt crisis for students, fully funding the IDEA special education program, which would help bring $51 million into the district, which could help with property taxes, since property taxes have been elevating because of the lack of funding for education, and to push for housing guarantees and to pay for all of this by taxing billionaires and ending overseas wars. All things that Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro is not fully on board with. And then lastly, I do want to hold the Democratic Party accountable for that corruption, because if the Democratic Party can just keep people off the ballot, deprive their own voters of a choice, and still expect them to come up and vote, then nothing is going to prevent this from happening in the future to another person who tries to have their voice heard within the party. We wanted to give the Democratic Party a chance to show that they were ready for change, that the naysayers were wrong when calling them corrupt. And unfortunately, the Democratic Party failed that test. And so they let us down. We want to pick people back up.
I think it's actually, unfortunately, a really common criticism of both the major parties, trying to line up candidates who the party believes can win, and that becomes kind of this sole focus of, we just have to win. And that pushes a lot of the issues to the side. Have you been picking up some signatures then? Are you out collecting signatures? And where are you in that process? What do you need, 7,500?
No. So Bill Fazio, I believe, is trying to get onto the ballot, endorsed with the Independent Party, and they need 7,500 signatures. For our campaign, it would just be 3,290. We're currently at around 1,300. We still have another month before the August 5th deadline. And it is much. So we did try and petition on as a Democratic candidate, but it honestly just became very disheartening because so many people are so disenfranchised with the Democratic Party. I mean, with both parties at the end of the day, because both parties seem more interested in sound bites and gotcha moments than actually trying to work together in, where there is commonality to deliver tangible results for people who are suffering. And so part of me is actually relieved to be running outside of the two-party system. because as a grassroots candidate, I've always said that I will not be beholden to corporations. If I'm able to win this election without having to go through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, I can now also say that I'm not beholden to the two-party system. And at the end of the day, I think the two-party system is outdated and it needs to change. And so that's why I'm a proponent of something called ranked choice voting, which I think would help break the stranglehold of the two-party system. But going around as an independent or as an unaffiliated candidate, I should say, because a lot of people in the state don't understand that there is actually an independent party versus an unaffiliated candidate. A lot of times they just lump the two in together, and so I do have to make that distinction. But it is much easier going up to people and asking, are they a registered voter? Would they be interested in signing a petition for an unaffiliated candidate? And more people have been much more enthusiastic about it, because when we were running into registered Democrat or unaffiliated and Republicans, the scoffs, the jeers, and again, I couldn't blame anyone. There was actually a person that said, "Oh, I recognize you from the news. What the Democratic Party did to you? That's why we left several years ago." And then, funny enough, I just saw a news article from the New Haven Independent showing that the Democratic State Party has tapped Vinnie Morrow to lead their voter outreach efforts, even though he was the one to deprive people in this district, the Democrats of this district, a choice in the primary. So it seems that the Democratic Party isn't going to learn, and so that's another reason why I feel elated running as an unaffiliated candidate, because I was always skeptical of the Democratic Party to begin with. I've never shied away from my criticisms of the Democratic Party. I was just hoping, I guess I was just hoping that the naysayers were wrong. But then when I firsthand pulled back the curtain and saw the corruption and saw that it is more or less just a high school club for people who have, too much time on their hands versus an actual institution looking to fight for working class and middle class values, and unaffiliated did seem the way to go.
Yeah, the Democratic Party kind of has, like a pecking order, I guess it is where they, they want to see their candidates who started at the local level, at the, in zoning or town council, and then work their way up to state rep, and then the state rep, they became a state senator perhaps, or whatever. And they tend to work with the unions and public employee unions to kind of pick candidates at the different state levels. Mm-hmm. For that reason, is because those people influence the laws, which then the unions want for their workers and whatever. And so it's kind of a unholy marriage in that sense. But once you get up into the upper echelons, when you're talking about running for Congress and stuff like that, that's where all those relationships that have been built over time tend to supersede, the issues in some cases that a lot of people are fighting for, and people get pushed out. You know what I mean?
So
go ahead.
I'm a big proponent of unions. However, they are confusing to me at times. So, like, for example, I think the AFL-CIO just endorsed Lamont, and a lot of unions are endorsing Lamont. But Lamont has vetoed pro-union legislation, and the teachers' unions and some of the unions in New Haven, the Yale union, they all talk about having fair wages for their workers, having universal health care, having all of these programs that would help their people. But then they vote against the person that actually believes in those policies. The New Haven teachers wouldn't have to worry about their contracts with healthcare if we had Medicare for all. Rosa DeLauro doesn't support that. I do. Yale University, New Haven loses $110 million a year because they do not pay property taxes. Rosa DeLauro has been there for 35 years. She's the queen of New Haven. Why has she not used her immense power to push back on Yale to secure that $110 million? Fun fact, when I worked for Yale for 12 years, at the end of my career at Yale, I actually sued them in the EEOC and federal government, the federal courts, for disability discrimination. Now, I didn't have money for a lawyer, so I had to defend myself. I wound up losing, But as a private citizen with absolutely nothing, I was willing to challenge Yale University. Why can't a congresswoman of 35 years who is a multimillionaire, who has all these connections, do more to push back and bring that $110 million to the city of New Haven? And why do unions keep supporting the people that have been there for, Lamont for 8 years, Rosa DeLauro for 35 years, John Larson for 27 years? All of these people that have been there for decades have all led us to the moment we are in now. Why do they still expect that these same people are going to get us out of the situation they themselves have caused?
Well, the time clock has burned up, Andrew. We really burned through it there. And I know that in the 3rd district, the Independent Party has a ballot line. So if you're seeking the cross endorsement or endorsement of the Independent Party, that could get you in the door as well as petitioning on. But you're an outsider running against a very powerful political incumbent. And what do you believe gives you the best chance of winning this race? And why should the voters vote for you?
Because I think, first of all, my background in science gives me a unique perspective on how to approach issues. And the spirit of collaboration is, one of the hallmarks of science. And I think we need more collaboration in the Congress. I also think that we need people who are more in touch with the issues that people are facing. I currently rent a home with my college roommate and dog because even though I have my master's, my salary has never been able to keep up with the rising cost of housing. And so I know what it's like to be priced out of the housing market. I know what it's like to see careers start to go away because of the introduction of AI. I did resign from my job to run for Congress, and I'm privileged that I have the resources, but I'm spending $1,200 a month on COBRA to maintain health insurance, on the risk of getting injured. So I think in this age, it is important for people who understand these problems being the people to help see the solutions versus someone that has been there for 35 years who is now a multimillionaire and is just out of touch with the people that she looks to serve. Whereas someone like me and our campaign is grassroots, and we are there hearing the people, trying to work through problems. And again, the scientific approach that we have to ensure that we are looking at everything we can to deliver actual results and actually give people an ability to live a thriving life in the richest, wealthiest, greatest country in this world.
Andrew Rice, thank you for your time, and I hope you can come back and update us, update everyone as your campaign moves forward. And
Absolutely.
Good luck in collecting those signatures. That can be an arduous task, but we'll talk to you again. I'm
tenacious. I don't give up.
All right. Bye for now.
Thank you, Dan. Bye, Connecticut.
All right. Folks, you can follow Andrew Rice at his campaign website, riceforct.com, or on social media at Andrew Rice CT3 for the latest updates. That's it for this edition of CT Politics TV. Please share this interview and stay engaged because your voice matters in DC. I'm Dan Newmyer. We'll see you next time on CT Politics TV for your Connecticut politics from the inside out.
Thanks for watching CT Politics TV with Dan Newmyer. On the air everywhere. Roku, Apple, Amazon Fire, and online at ctpolitics.tv. Watch on demand, submit Speak Out CT videos, vote on bills with lawmakers, or join a panel show today at ctpolitics.tv.